But for now, handing over to the main man, Norman Lebrecht, on why Jews need music. Thank you so much, Norman, for leading us through this illustrated tour.
I hope this is going to be an illustrated talk. This is going to depend a little bit on the technology when we get into it. What I want to do is just to develop with you informally over the next 40, 45 minutes or so, some ideas about this very, very complicated relationship between music and the Jews. It goes back an awfully long way. And I have been thinking about it and working on it for about 8 years since I made a 3-part series with BBC. And I've also looked at the ways that some parallels have developed with the Christian church. Music in religion doesn't develop in isolation. One has to be aware of what's going on in other cultures and in other societies in order to understand how our relationship to music evolves. So let's take it back to the very, 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 very beginning. And I'm going to allow you to unmute for 1 second, because I'm going to ask you, what is the first reference to music in Torah? Please don't all answer at once, but somebody unmute and tell me. My God, dead silence. Well, no, there's a crossing of the Red Sea. No, earlier. Come on. No, come on, serious. Come. No? No? There is a man called Jubal in Genesis 4:21, I think it is. There's no mention of music in the 7 days of creation. Okay, it's an omission. But you go on a couple more chapters, and in Genesis 4:21, you read about this man called Yuval, and it says he is Avi kol tofes kinor v'ugav. He's the father of all who hold the violin and the lute. He's the first musician. His half-brother is called Tubal Cain, who is a blacksmith who also makes instruments. So we have, right at the very beginning, we have two professions. We have a profession of musician and we have a profession of luthier. Now, this is no coincidence here, okay? This is before there are doctors, lawyers, accountants, actuaries, hedge funds, authors even. We have a profession of musician, a profession of instrument maker. So clearly, music is rooted from a very, very, very early time in Jewish and Hebraic culture. That is no coincidence. Now, the next major instance of it, as I think David it was said, is with the crossing of the Red Sea. Let's look at the crossing of the Red Sea, okay? They get through the Red Sea, they come out on the other side, and Moses says, let's sing, everybody sing together, sing, 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 and they dance as well. They sing and they dance, and then what happens? Moses' sister, Miriam, says, excuse me, the women need to sing and dance as well, so she puts them together, and they start singing. What does the verse say? Betupim uvimecholot, with drums and with some kind of dancing instruments. Just think about that for a moment. They've come out of Egypt, okay? They've come out in the middle of the night. They haven't had time to have their bread rise. They've rushed out into the desert, but they've taken their instrument truck with them. Yeah, they're like the London Symphony Orchestra on the road. They haven't forgotten their instruments in Egypt, because they're going to need to make music in the desert. It is central, it is integral to their culture, to their civilization, to their religious practice. When you read what Miriam has done there, that she puts them together and then she gets the instruments, the tupim v'mcholot, this tells you how interwoven the idea of music is with the Jews. And it carries on like this. There are various further instances in Torah where there are songs and there are recitations with music. There is the Song of the Well. And then, of course, Moses' great final declaration, the Parashah of Hazinu, is clearly a song. He is clearly singing a farewell. It's a Maleri, an Abschied to the children of Israel in this portion, and then so on and so forth, down through Jewish history until we come to the figure of King David. Now, King David is clearly a born musician. We know he was a musician. He was a musician at Saul's court before he became a rebel and had to go into hiding, and then he became a hero and the leader of the Jewish people. And as soon as he becomes king, he starts writing psalms. And the Psalms are phenomenal in all sorts of ways. They're phenomenal poetry, but they're phenomenal in the amount of instruction and information that they give us about the essence of the music that is embedded in the Psalm itself. Simplest example, what is the meaning of the word Selah? Anyone? Fermata, closure, closure. You will only find the word Selah at the end of a Psalm. It's an instruction to the conductor. Yeah, that's it. Okay? The conductor. It's the word that opens a whole load of Psalms, isn't it? To the conductor, a song of this particular kind. The Psalms are imbued with musical instruction. Lamenatzeach al hagitit le'asaf, to the conductor on the gitit, by or attributed to a man called Asaf. What is the gitit? Obviously a musical instrument. It's a gitit, it's hitit, it's possibly a guitar. Okay? One of my favorite ones. I mean, no, not one of my favorites. My absolute favorite. Okay? Lamanatzeach al hayelet hashach. I'm sorry for those who don't speak Hebrew. I will try to do all the appropriate translations and make it as illustrated as possible. Lamanatzeach al hayelet hashach mizmor David. To the conductor, upon the hind of dawn, upon the deer as it is seen at the break of day, Mizmor David, a song to David. What is the hind at dawn? Any ideas? Picture it, picture it. The sun is rising and there is a deer sitting somewhere in your estates, and the sun is rising behind it, and it's that shape. So King David, or whoever the author is, writes into the psalm, I want an instrument of the shape of a deer at dawn. It may be some early keyboard instrument. Yeah? That's how this song is going to go. We sing in the I mean, I could give you so many examples. One last example, okay? Alei Asor v'alei Navel, from the Psalm of the Sabbath day. The psalm that we sing to welcome in the Sabbath day. Alei Asor is a 10-stringed instrument. V'alei Navel is a harp. So we have a huge instrumentarium now on which to perform the 150 psalms. And we know that these psalms are sung in the temple. We know when we read the Song of Ascents, there are 15 different Shir HaMa'alot, songs of ascents, right? These are songs that are sung on each of the steps of the temple as they go up, the 15 steps of the temple. And each step has its own psalm, its own Shir HaMa'alot. It says in the Gemara that you could go into the temple at any time of day and you'd know exactly what the time was from what the Levites are singing, because they're singing the psalm of that particular step, that particular day, that particular time of day. So this incredibly musical civilization, what happened to it? Where is it? Why don't we know the tunes for the songs of ascents? Why? I mean, clearly there must be in different keys. There must be different modulations there. What happened? What happened is the temple got destroyed. And when the temple got destroyed, a lot of people were killed. And when people die, we go into mourning. And what's the first thing we do in mourning? We ban the music. We have no music. We have no music for a month. We have no music for a year. In the case of the destruction of the temple, the rabbis said, no music at all. We don't want it anymore until the temple is rebuilt. Temple is rebuilt. The music starts again. The Levites pick up their songs. It carries on. And then in AD 70, the temple is destroyed again. And this time, the rabbis say there is going to be a weeping for generations. There is going to be an endless mourning until the temple is rebuilt. And what does that mean? That means the abolition of music from Jewish civilization. That means the absence of music from worship, from Jewish life, even from private life. We lost our music the day the music died. And for the next 5 centuries, nothing happens. We hear nothing more of music. until in the 6th century, a group of rabbis called the Masoretes get together in a town called Tiberias, Tveria, by the Sea of Galilee. And they're very concerned because the Jewish people have been dispersed all over the Northern Hemisphere. And they're concerned that they will forget their scriptures, and even more, that there may be alternative versions of scriptures flourishing because people have forgotten the actual words of Torah. And so they create a system known as tropes, which we call in Hebrew tamim, by which the Torah would be sung uniformly whenever it is read in public. And these tamim exist to this day. They don't always sound the same. A Yemenite reading the tamim will sound different from a German Jew, will sound different from a Polish Jew, will sound different from Ashkenazim, sound different from Sephardim. But the uniform system of reading the Torah was put down in Tveria. It is a musical system, put down in Tveria in the 6th century. It's a musical system, and that's what we have. It's not very musical. I mean, it doesn't, you don't want to sing and dance to it, but at least what it does is it uses music as a mnemonic. The fear that the rabbis had that scriptures would be forgotten or traduced in some way is obviated by using the most effective memory tool known to humankind, which is music. I mean, we know that music is the first active part of the brain. We also know it is the last part of the brain to atrophy when amnesia or Alzheimer's or some other kind of dementia sets in. It is the longest lasting part of the brain, and they must have sensed that, and that's why they created these tropes for Torah. What happens after that? Nothing for 1,000 years. I mean, nothing. You know, they call it the Dark Ages with good reason. They should call it the Deaf Ages because we don't hear anything. We do not know what Jews are doing, what Jews are singing, what's actually happening in this time. And after 1,000 years, in the 16th century, something germinates. And we know that something has already germinated during the Golden Age in Spain. There have been Jewish poets in Spain. There's been Yehuda Levi, there's been Ibn Ezra, there's been a whole load of others who have written poetry, and poetry usually comes with music. So there is a suspicion that despite the rabbinic prohibition, that some kind of music has crept back into Jewish life. When I say the rabbinic prohibition, as late as the 12th century, Maimonides says, no music. Okay, we're mourning the temple, no music. So it's a very, very strong prohibition when the greatest codifier of law says, stop singing, stop playing, you're not allowed to, we're mourning the temple, all right? But comes the 16th century, and in a small town called Safed in Galilee, Tzfat, people come together from the lands of our dispersion. They come from Spain, and they come from other parts of Southern Europe. And extraordinarily, two of them, one is the greatest codifier of Jewish law, Rabbi Yosef Karo, and the other is the greatest mystic, the Arizal at Luria. Okay, and they're living side by side in Tzfat, and there is another man called Shlomo El-Kabetz, who's a musician. He has strong musical instincts, and in that time in Tzfat in the 16th century, we see a new ritual forming around the Sabbath. First of all, around the welcoming of the Sabbath, which comes with songs, which particularly comes with a song written by El-Kabetz known as Unmute L'Chadodi. I can't get you to unmute because Eli is sitting on the mute button. We have singing. We have singing again in the welcoming of the Sabbath. We also have songs for the Sabbath table, the Zmirot, which also come in at this period. So suddenly there is a revival of music in Jewish worship, and clearly it must have been sanctioned by someone, and the someone that it was sanctioned by would have been Rabbi Yosef Karo, the greatest codifier of Jewish law, author of the Shulchan Aruch. If you go to the cemetery in Tzfat, if ever you're around there, you really should do this. Because for me, it was just such an emotional experience. You go and you look for the graves of the Arizal, the great mystic, and Yosef Karo, the great codifier of law, and Shlomo El-Kabetz, the great musician, the writer, the author of Lachadodi. And where are they? They're all together. They're actually one next to the other. There's a little plinth, and the three of them are up there. So this is the beginning of a kind of musical revival in Judaism. And it starts to filter through. It was a little slower in those times. They didn't have the internet. They didn't even have Zoom. I mean, you can imagine. And but it starts to filter back into Jewish consciousness. And the procedure then starts to gather pace towards the end of the 18th century. The 18th century, end of the 18th century is significant because it's the beginning of a reform movement in Judaism. And what happens in Reform Judaism is exactly the same that happened in the time of Henry VIII in England, when the Church of England broke away from Rome. Now, I know many of you are reading Hilary Mantel at the moment, so this will be very familiar. When the Church of England broke away, it needed its own liturgy. Liturgy, you need poets and you need composers. And so you have this tremendous resurgence, this English renaissance of Tallis and Tye and Bull and so many others who start writing English music for the first time. England becomes the musical hub of the world because the king is commissioning music left, right, and center for his new rituals, okay? A similar thing happens in Judaism at the end of the 18th century, in the Napoleonic times. Reform Judaism is starting its own services. It is cutting out parts of the traditional Siddur, parts of the traditional Tefillah, and it needs music. And it starts looking around for decent people who can compose. And the first one they find is a man called Salomon Sulzer in Vienna, in the new synagogue on the Seitenstädtengasse. You can still go there. It is actually, it looks like the Vienna Opera House in miniature, except it was built before the Vienna Opera House. So it may be that the Opera House was conceived as a Seitenstädtengasse temple in writ large. That's a private theory. Let's needn't go any further. Solomon Sulzer wrote an enormous amount for worship in the temple, but he didn't confine it to his own reform right. He actually wrote a little bit on the side for the Orthodox as well, because the Orthodox were starting to respond. So, look, if the devil has all the best tunes and they're all reform, we need some of those ourselves. So we don't have much of Solomon Sulzer in use anymore. I'll just give you one example, if I can do this on share screen. If I can do this on share screen, this is going to be such a miracle. Ellie, don't move from your chair, because I may need you to get the share screen back. I'm going to try and go and just play you a little bit of Solomon Sulzer so you know what's going on. It's a share screen. Come on. Yeah, done that. Share, right. And now I'm going to go to, here we go. Please tell me you're getting this, all right? Yes? You're getting it?
Yes, but you can make it full screen as well.
Okay, right. Okay, so that's familiar, isn't it? Yeah, that's still in use in both Reform and Orthodox worship. Did you get that? Yes?
We didn't. We
You
did.
didn't
We
hear-
got the first little bit.
You got the first little bit. So I
That was
shouldn't
it.
have okay, I shouldn't have enlarged. Okay, we'll try another one in just a second. Salsa is important because he had a wonderful voice, and people used to drop into his synagogue. And among the people who dropped in were Franz Schubert and Franz Liszt, and quite possibly Beethoven as well. And Liszt in particular spoke very highly of him. He commissioned Schubert to write, to compose psalms in Hebrew. In Hebrew, there is a psalm for the Sabbath day that Schubert has written, which is sung in Hebrew, and is pretty remarkable. But you need a very good choir. The other significant cantor and composer of this time is a man called Louis Lewandowski. Sulzer is in Berlin, Sulzer is in Vienna, Lewandowski is in Berlin. Let me see if I can play you a clip of Lewandowski, because again, this is something that is used both by Reform and by Orthodox. Let's go share. Let's go Lewandowski. Go. Yes.
Can't hear it.
It stops again, Norman.
It stopped again?
Yeah. You,
Okay.
It stopped when
as
we
soon as
saw
you say yes. Yeah.
Is it running again?
You
No.
need to leave share. You need to leave share screen on for the whole clip and then turn it off.
Okay.
We were in for 30 seconds.
How about now? Better?
That's good.
Okay, that'll, hang on. Now I'm trying to stop it, hang on. Okay, let's get rid of him, there we are. So you get the idea, right? I'm trying to come back to you. Can you
We
see
can
me?
see you. We can see you and hear you.
Okay, I can't see me, but I guess yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, fine. Yeah, we're back. Right. So we're starting to see quite ornate music coming back in to Jewish usage. We're also starting to see non-Jewish composers listening in. The most important of them, of course, is Ludwig van Beethoven. We don't know that Beethoven had very much connection with Jews. He doesn't talk very much about them, certainly none of his inner circles. There are a few individuals with whom he's friendly, but there's nothing, it's not a particularly great concern of his, okay? Until we come to the Opus 132, which is one of the great lost string quartets of Beethoven. It's huge, it's an immense work. It's work that contemplates the universe, contemplates eternity. He has just recovered from a terrible illness. He didn't think he was going to survive. And he uses a little bit of Catholic liturgy at some point. But then in the sixth movement, he does this. Come on, share screen, share. And hang on. He does this. Right, we know what that is, don't we?
Coleridge Ray?
This is Beethoven putting Coleridge Ray into one of his last works. We're starting to see some kind of dialogue beginning between Jewish liturgical music and European Western culture and civilization. To this day, I have no idea where Beethoven got the tune from, because he'd been deaf for 15 years. Had he heard it as a younger man passing a synagogue? Had somebody written it down for him and he thought, yeah, that might be worth using? But there's absolutely no mistaking what Beethoven is doing here. He's using Coleridge Ray, right? The first Jewish composer to make a significant contribution to Western secular and Christian religious music is Felix Mendelssohn. Mendelssohn, grandson of the great Jewish philosopher Moses Mendelssohn, is a child prodigy, more accurately, a teenage prodigy, certainly writing music of a higher quality in his teens than anybody since Mozart. And he is, having been baptized at the age of 7, he is the acme of Christian respectability. He is the Lutheran composer par excellence. He's a friend of Queen Victoria. She and Prince Albert absolutely adore him. He never allows any suggestion of his Jewishness to pass his lips. Recently, I have discovered some letters that he wrote home in which he used Yiddish phrases with it to his mother and to his sisters. There is more to Mendelssohn than meets the eye. But what I sometimes in his music, and there are elements in his music, where suddenly you know that you are in the presence of Mendelssohn, the suppressed Jew. And I'm going to give you just one example. And it's from his Reformation Symphony. Okay? This is not just a Christian composer. This is not just a Lutheran composer. This is the first composer to write a symphony about Luther's Reformation, okay? And this is how he begins its third movement. Where are you, Mendelssohn? Hang on. Sorry, let's try again. Something else got in the way. I need you, Mendelssohn. Where are you? Come on. Yes. Right, listen to this. I'll just give you that, okay? Spot that tune? Anyone? You got it, yeah? You're coming into land at Ben Gurion Airport on an El Alf lane. That's what they play here, Venu Shalom Aleichem. Venu Shalom Aleichem is a Jewish tune from Eastern Europe. Mendelssohn in his Reformation Symphony, third movement. What's going on here? This is a kind of Jewish musical unconscious that is feeding into the most Christian of symphonies. Right? There are many more examples that I can give you. I absolutely don't want to go on too long. Let me give you one example from George Gershwin. Let's run forward a long way. Gershwin, I deal with this in my book, Genius and Anxiety. I also have more to say about Mendelssohn. Gershwin, his mother tongue is Yiddish. They spoke Yiddish at home. He says that he writes in the Fragish mode, in a questioning mode. There is an awful lot of Jewish expression in what he writes. But the one example I'm going to give you is really, really particular because it relates directly to the Sabbath service, the Sabbath morning service. And it is the most popular aria that he ever wrote. It's from Porgy and Bess, which is an opera about poor poor black people, supposedly, but if you turn it upside down, it could also be an opera about Jewish people living in a ghetto and the way that they interact. There's an awful lot of work still to be done on Gershwin. Let me just play the opening of Summertime, right? Come on. Looking for it, sorry, here we are. Oops, come on. Okay. Da da dum. Reverse that. Shabbat morning service. Baruch Hu. Da da dum. Okay, it's the same phrase. It's just turned on its head. There is an awful lot in Gershwin that comes unconsciously from what is a developing and a very diverse evolution of Jewish music that has been going on right the way through the 19th century. Now, I've only mentioned essentially two areas, three areas. One is reform, one is sort of mainstream orthodoxy, and one is the impact and the interaction with Western culture and Western music. Let me mention two other streams equally tremendously important. One, of course, is Hasidic music. The Hasidic movement arises about 100 years before Reform and is projected as a very democratic movement, that it appeals to those. It's an outreach movement to those who don't have learning, and it uses, from its very founder, from the Baal Shem Tov, it uses music as a means of communication, as a means of drawing people in. So Hasidic music is tremendously important. And then the other thing that happens is the rise of the Chazan. Chazan, as far as we know, didn't really exist as a profession until at least the 18th century. But once the music was available, and once the Chazan started to create his own songs or to elaborate his own songs, it became a bit of a show, and people would come to synagogue as much to hear the cantor as they would to join in the prayer. And this, of course, was a further stimulant to the cantors to make their practice more elaborate. When this combined with the music of Hasidic Jews, it became very ornate, and you got something like this. What we're getting here is something perhaps of a return to the original sophistication and diversity. We're getting multiple forms of music that the Jews are taking hold of during the 19th century and creating different art forms. Now, I've tried to keep this as concise as I can, and I haven't even begun to get into the various musics of the Sephardi Jews, which are equally interesting, and certainly in the 20th century, we've developed in some surprising and remarkable directions. But what we're looking at here is the resumption of a broken relationship. And I don't know of any precedent or parallel for that in the whole of human history and civilization. Just imagine if a society had said, we're going to stop reading for 1,000 years. How do you resume reading? You have to create a whole new alphabet. You have to develop new teaching methods. You have to create reasons for reading. It's not possible. The same with any other art form, with painting or with sculpture. If you eliminate it for a period, if you eliminate it for 2 generations, it is gone. And what we're seeing here is that after this breach, this divorce between Jews and music, we then find in the 19th and 20th centuries a kind of a rapprochement, a reconciliation, a renaissance, an explosion of Jewish music, and a regard among Jews for music that hadn't existed before in their religion. We get very little in rabbinic literature about music. It doesn't, you find as little written about music as you do about the visual arts, of which there is anyway some kind of taboo. It just doesn't seem to enter, and yet, in the past century and a half, it's become central and extraordinarily important. So we're looking at a relationship over 2,000 years, which has had its ups, and then a complete breach, and then a kind of reconciliation, and now a development point, a way in which we can take it forward. I don't think there's any way for me to take it forward at this moment, because it's 20 to 8, and we've got about 5 minutes for questions, and then I'm going to have to get off this because the next one is coming up. There is always another shiur or talk around the corner on this South Hampstead site. So if you have questions, unmute yourself and ask them, and I'll try and deal with them in about 5 minutes. Are we good there? Yeah? Have we got anyone unmuting or any questions?
Any questions? Roll up, roll up.
Norman, when are you going to continue this? It's fascinating. That's a question.
That's it's a very good question. I need to prepare some more material. I'm happy to carry on with the theme. I think it is a it is still it's sort of semi-unexplored territory. And I'm feeling my way into it because there is so little literature and there is so little scholarship on it. There are some specific areas that people delve into, but the totality of it, and particularly the psychology of it, the mental health of Jews and music and how they work together, that is an open field. And yes, David, yes, I mean, yeah, we should, in the long weeks ahead, when we're going to look for diversions and distractions, yeah, we may consider coming back to it.
I hope
but
so.
I mean, it's specifically, if you want to look at some of the things that I've dealt with, particularly Mendelssohn and Gershwin, you'll find a lot more in Genius and Anxiety. Sorry, yeah, you were going to, ask, someone was going to ask.
Could we hear a little bit more of the Hasidic Chazan?
Isn't he astonishing? His name is Shulam Leber.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
He is absolutely astonishing. I tell you what I'll do. I will send all the clips to Eli, and he can put them up on the website, and then everybody can share them. Okay.
This would make an interesting. This would make an interesting series of lectures every Tuesday. You've got a week to do more research. So it's like sound bites. There's so much more to look into. just
Yes.
devote your time for the next week, and I think it'd be a great idea.
That's a very, very, very kind and very welcome suggestion. But there are one or 10 other things that I need to do
So this is priority now.
over that period.
Southampton lecture series is a priority.
Well, let me see how we can develop it, and I'll
Great,
I'll come
thank you.
back
That's
to you.
very,
I'll come
very
back to you.
interesting. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Norman,
Anyone
which
else?
is your favorite type of music with a Jewish flavor? Do you like looking at Chazan Lehman thinking, wow, this is the authentic stuff? Or do you prefer to hear little bits of Jewish themes in other types of music and think, oh, that's interesting, it's woven in? What gets you excited?
I mean, I'm so Catholic, I listen to anything. I'm just, I was, you know, I was very fortunate. I probably had perfect pitch as a child. I, at one point, had a girlfriend from Lebanon who taught me to listen to microtones. So you know, the Western diatonic system is based on 8 or 12 tones. Microtones, you can fracture those into 16, 32, 64. If you're able to hear those intervals in a 32 note scale, then you are into infinite possibilities of music. And so I listened to that in Arabic and other musics. And I, you know, just try and find a common humanity that we seek to express in this particular art form. I can't imagine the psychological damage that was done by erasing music from our civilization for such a long time. And actually, I can't imagine that the Jewish people went along with this. And I'm sure that they retained some things and they kept some things at home. And there were some things they still sang and they still hummed. The Yemenite Jews, who had the most prolonged isolation of any Jewish community. They were isolated not just from the rest of the Jews in the world, but also from their surrounding society. They were ghettoized in Yemen for 1,500 years. Their traditions clearly go back a very, very long way. And I find the music of the Yemenite Jews fascinating. And there may be something in that to discover and develop and see where it is that we're going in our own relationship with music today.
Interesting, and you yourself go between Ashkenazi and Sephardi.
Yes, and you know, and all points west.
Yes, you're regularly in both types of communities and pray the different nuskha and melodies.
One of the reasons that I became immersed, one of the reasons I became immersed in Sephardi literature, and particularly in Spanish and Portuguese literature, is that most of the music that we use in Ashkenazi synagogues is of recent provenance, recent being the last 200 years. In the Sephardi literature, you can trace some of it back 500 years to Spain in 1492, and some of it still further. There are one or two figures and tropes within the music which have a commonality with forms that are used by the Iraqi Jews. If that is the case, then we may be some way towards finding a common root, a common heritage. But that's, you know, that is a long discussion. We're not going to get into that tonight. And it'll need dozens of music examples. I'm so glad that I found that share button. Changed my life.